conversation this morning, but I'm really excited this afternoon to invite our guest today, who's travelled the world for at least the past 9 years, working with Aston Martin Formula One for several seasons, leading performance and engineering and strategy functions. So we're going to hear a bit more about that. And now currently presenting Formula One for Sky Sports. So please join me in welcoming on the stage Bernie Collins. Bernie, please.
Made it without falling, so that's good. Stage one.
Without falling. Grab a pew. Well, thank you for joining us here today. So let me just sort of set things up a little bit. So we have an audience here of travel managers, people managing expense. We've had a good conversation, I think, this morning, a couple of presentations around data and the impact of AI and helping us make more informed decisions to improve our sort of strategic competitiveness. And one of the things that I touched on briefly this morning was I talked about a man called Henry Ford. And Henry Ford was the son of an Irish farmer. And maybe we could use that as a start point. So before we start, perhaps you could just give us a bit of an introduction. Give us your background, your journey.
Yeah, sure. So hello, everyone. It's lovely to be here. Thank you for listening. I am Irish, as you can tell by the accent. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do at school, so I decided to do engineering because I thought that was nice and broad. I love mathematics. That was fine. So I did mechanical engineering at Queen's and studied there for 5 years, and then went to the McLaren graduate scheme. So joined McLaren as part of their graduate scheme for a year. And through that year, I ended up doing a lot of design work. So I started in gearbox design for a little bit, some suspension design, and then decided I really wanted to be at the track. I loved being at the track. I loved the environment. So I worked really hard to get there. I did a year as Jensen Button's performance engineer in 2014. And then 2015, I moved to Aston Martin. So for the last 8 years, I was doing the strategy function at Aston Martin. I finished as head of race strategy. Got off the pit wall in July last year, so a bit over a year ago. And just decided to try something new. So now I'm with Sky Sports, hopefully explaining a bit of the strategy functions, of the engineering functions to the normal viewer at home. So trying to make it a bit more relatable, trying to get across some points that maybe haven't been done well in the past.
That's fantastic. So I would imagine it's a dream job for several people in the room. So maybe if we sort of use that as a start point, we also heard this morning about the number of sensors on a car and how much information is gathered. I think I read somewhere it's 1.5 terabytes over a race weekend.
Yeah.
And then we also looked at this weekend, positions 3 and 4 were separated just by milliseconds.
Yeah.
So maybe just give us some insight over to the impact of that data collection over the past 10 years on how that might have changed the role.
Yeah, so F1 is pushed into data collection. As engineers, we love data collection. We're always looking for more. And that expands through the entire system, through the entire team. One of the things we're forced into is we've only, in a normal weekend, 3 one-hour practice sessions. So your time for data collection is very limited. So you're trying to collect as much data as you can in that time and then spend the rest of the time analysing. And you're forced to make very quick decisions. So that might be between one session to another, how quickly you can decide on the car setup, how quickly you can decide on what tyres you're going to run, whatever the case may be. One of the big things with our data is that our data is continuously, it's not clean A/B test. You never get a clean test. You always have track improvement, different tyres, driver improvement, different wind, different temperatures, whatever. So you're trying to build the best matrix of data you can such that you can interpolate safely within that space. You never get the clean tests that you would like. You never get a straight answer. The conditions are never the same as what they're going to be in the race. So that data lake, if you want, or however your data is presented, it's so important that you can quickly find your way through that, very quickly pull the data out of it. And, very simple things. Like when I started in 2015 as strategy, we looked at lap time. You're saying, a tenth over the whole lap. We looked at lap time in the 3 sectors. So for each lap, we had 3 bits of information related to that lap. We can see if we were fast in sector 1 or sector 2 or whatever. Now we've changed. So now we use GPS. So we can split the sector into 10 or 15 bits. So now we can say, not we're fast or quick on sector 1, we're fast or quick in turn 1. or it's braking for turn one, or it's accelerating out of turn one. So now we can split down exactly when we're losing time, to the point that now, during a race live, you can tell that your own driver, the guy behind is charging his battery, he's going to attack next lap. Yeah. So you can say loads of things. You know, we heard it for anyone who watched it the weekend, when Checo was trying to overtake Alonso, he was being told he has a better line through this corner, he's doing it on traction. So much information now comes because we're collecting more and more data.
So how much, this is probably a daft question, but how much influence do you have over the driver as opposed to the independence that the driver has themselves? With the conflict?
I was going to say it depends on the driver. Yeah. Some listen and some don't. Most listen. A lot of it comes down to experience. A lot of it comes down to trust. You're working with vast amounts of data. You're working with an individual, a driver, and that's what means that often we can't just do the fastest strategy, or often for us, we can't do the same strategy across both cars because maybe one driver will make that work and one driver won't make that strategy work. So built into this very data-driven environment, you do have this human element, which again, we've tried to say, you know, one driver is X many milliseconds off the other always in qualifying. So we start to factor these things in, or if they've got worse DEG or better DEG. It all becomes, for me, one of the big things in strategy, in data use, is the analysis is really key. And a lot of it is about being data-led and not results-led. So you can have a good result, like a podium. Mm-hmm. Do you understand why? Did you make the right decisions? Was any of it just luck? Even when you have a bad result, you know, did you make very good decisions and just the car wasn't good, or you had an accident or whatever? It's all about being data-led. Every bit of analysis you do, if you do it in a very data-led way, if you had to make the same decision again, would you? And why? And if not, why not? And normally for us, it comes back to what bit of data did we not have, or did we miss, or did we not visualize correctly that led us to that incorrect decision? And when you do all that analysis with your driver, week in, week out, actually it builds this element of trust. So the next time that you go back to a decision, a direction, a piece of advice, the driver's much more on board with it.
So that must take a lot of time, but a huge amount of discipline to do that reflection. Just maybe talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so sure. So for example, if we did last week, if we did the race in Brazil as a strategist, we would spend all of this week analysing that race, and only a few days next week prepping for the race to come. So you spend a lot more time analysing a race than you do preparing for the next one, because that analysis is so key to everything you do going forward. And the big thing from our side is, as a team, you analyse your own decisions and your own actions, but you also analyse everyone else. There's 9 other teams to learn from. If they made a different decision, why? If they had a better result, why? And one of the things that we look at is, for our car, you know, Aston Martin, we're normally in the midfield. Where were we expected to finish with the car that we had? Where should our car have finished? Mm-hmm. If we finished higher than that, why? Was it strategy? Was it someone retiring? Was it reliability? Whatever. If we finished lower than that, why? So over the year, we would count up all the points gained or lost by strategy relative to expected. And then we would start to look at, okay, with those points, where should we have been? Or with that reliability, where should we have been? So everything comes down to the analysis, and it's really, really key, because you learn so much in that analysis phase. You will make a different decision. Often it prompted, even within the strategy group, very good discussions of what should we have done and why should we have done. Or so for example, the drivers, or I still do it now, we get all the team radio for the other drivers. So we get everything that an engineer at pit wall says to a driver, all of that. So I'd listen to that after the race for all the other drivers.
So there's no secrets in the race?
There's no secrets. Oh, well, so it became a regulation, basically. So, you know, the FIA were sort of, everyone was using codes, or they were like, well, we're just going to give everyone all the information.
Okay.
And then, you know, there's certain things you would try not to tell the driver. So now we get all that. So we listen to it. And by listening to it, you can start to formulate what others' plans were or how much they've changed it. So it's this brand new bit of data that opened up maybe in the last four or 5 years. but you learn so much about your competitor.
So on race day, who are you competing with? Are you competing with your performance last week, or are you competing with the other drivers? There has to be a bit of both.
Both. So you want to, and the big thing for me is continuous improvement. It's about continuously improving. It's about year on year improving. Even in a year where the car is bad, the group should still be improving, such that when the car is good, the group is ready to go. And the same applies to pit stops, for example. So one of the things I've sort of been trying to look at is, for anyone who watches it, but in Qatar, McLaren had a 1.8 second pit stop. It's the fastest pit stop ever. Yeah. So in 1.8 seconds, I can't even say all the things that happen in a pit stop.
Yeah.
But I think it was 2017, their pit stop was 2.5 seconds. So in 7 years, they have taken 28% off their pit stop time. So that's incredible. And it's year on year. And there'll be different crew involved. There's new regulations involved that are actually designed to slow down pit stops compared to what they were back then. But year on year, they've improved. So it's just continuous development. You look at every stop for them, every stop for others. What can we learn? Where can we improve? What training do we need? What equipment do we need? So it's a continuous cycle of improvement to get there.
Fantastic. We spoke before today. You said something to me, which again, I found quite mind-boggling. You don't look after one driver during a race, do you?
No.
So how does that work?
It's one of the things I find in times the most interesting, also the most challenging. So there's 20 drivers, there's 10 teams. It's one of the few sports, I think, where you've got two individuals competing against each other, but a single team. So the team are interested in team points, the drivers are interested in drivers' points. The drivers are fundamentally selfish people, and I'm sure they will admit to that, because they want to they need to beat their teammate. That's their first and foremost, and they want to be the best. That's why they're there. But the team wants the team to be the best. So sometimes you might want to sacrifice one position to get a better overall finishing result. You can imagine how crazy the intercom is at times when there's a safety car or some weather conditions, but you start to compartmentalize things. So for me, example, sitting on the pit wall, Sebastian Vettel's race engineer was to my left and Lance Stroll's was to my right. On my screen, on my data, that same applied. So Sebastian's data on my left, Lance's data on my right. In the garage behind me, their cars were in that order. So Sebastian left. So everything is like that. On the intercom, the same applied. So I listened to Sebastian's data in my left ear and Lance in my right. And it's amazing how you get used to it. It sounds crazy, but it's amazing how you get used to it. Because you can imagine in the safety car, everyone's speaking at once. Everyone's got to see it. So you have to find a way to split that. And that actually works really well. And sometimes because you hear an engineer or an engine issue, whatever, and just because it's left or right, I know which car it applies to. So I know which data to look at. I know which pit window to look at. I know which video feed to look at, whatever it might be. It's all...
But we didn't talk about this, and I've not written this down. But I'm just listening to this thinking, how do you get yourself physically ready for the day on the zone? Because there's no hanging about.
No, sure. And I think it goes again to the very, very, very deal-led approach. We prep everything. And I mean everything. So, for example, if you have an accident on lap 1, which is common, the guys in the garage know which tyre to fit. So they know which tyre to fit without me saying anything on the radio. So we always have what's called a lap 1 and bailout tyre ready to go. Because that is, we just always need to have it ready to go. And that involves no interaction from me. The guys in the garage know, they know what angle the wing's going to have to go to. They know where the spare might be. That first lap 1 doesn't take any interaction. And even in a very boring one-stop race, we make decisions every lap. We do, what if we have damage now? What if we have a puncture now? What if there's a safety car now? Lots and lots of what ifs. Because if it's happened once, it could happen again. And if it has happened once and could happen again, why do we not have a plan for it? Why do we not have a plan for that situation? And we go through that. It's the same for everything. Pit stops, the guys will practice front wing changes. They'll practice a broken jack. They'll practice a broken gun. we practice all of these things and we build in plans for all of these things because we have a list of things that have gone on in the past. And we know what we should do in those situations. So why do we not have a plan for it? So prep is key to it.
No, I get that. I should go back to these questions. I'm just frustrated. I'm sorry. Yeah, let me go to my next question. So it's great having a plan, but not everything goes to plan.
Yes, sure.
So dynamic decision making in a crisis.
Yeah.
Some things happen that you've not seen before. You must have a plan for what does a crisis look like?
Yeah.
How do you invoke that?
Well, I'll use an example for that. So again, it's in Bahrain. It's the only win we had, which is why I use it as an example. It's a win. But in 2020, we won the Bahrain Grand Prix, but lap 1, Checo crashed. So he crashed, he caused a safety car, he took out 2 of our rivals, which was useful later on. But it was a 53-second qualifying lap. So you've got 53 seconds from where he is to the start-finish line. You need to give the crew 10 or 15 seconds notice. So you've got 40 seconds to decide if you need to do a pit stop or not. So you need to decide if the car is damaged, if there's a puncture, lots of things. So we split resource. We're very exact in our split of resource. Within the strategy group, it's someone's job to look at the videos. It's someone's job to look at competitors. It's someone's job to look at our own lap times. So you've a really well-defined split of roles. The tyre group are looking at the tyre pressures, and the aero group are looking at the front wings. So you're formulating individual mini decisions that are all going into the big one. And there's a very regimented protocol of communication and of that split of resource, because what used to happen is you would have an accident, everyone would look at the video. Everyone wants to see the video, see what's happened. Everyone's looking at tyre pressures because they know that's possibly the next best thing. But that doesn't free up people to make decisions. So in that example, because all of the other people were doing the other things to figure out if we needed to stop or not, the strategy function can decide, well, should we stop anyway? Even if the car is okay, we're now at the back anyway, there's a safety car, should we stop? So in that instance, the car was fine and all the data came back to say the car was fine, but we stopped and fitted a different tyre because we knew that was quicker. It's just about freeing overhead to make decisions. So freeing your experts to make the decision on what they want to and compartmentalising everything else.
Interesting. So we all work in teams in business, and as a man that's not short of an opinion, I know that sometimes you can have competing opinions.
Yeah.
In your business, your organisation, you are at the top of the field. You're all specialists, but everybody can't agree all at the same time.
Yeah.
When you've got 40 seconds to make a decision, how do you coalesce everybody? I guess you're not looking for consensus.
You're not looking for consensus. You're looking probably for the balance of probabilities of what you think might be right. In those sorts of decision, for example, as head of strategy, I guess the final strategy decision led with me and not with the individual strategist. So though someone might say, I'm not quite sure, it's not the right time. The race engineer actually in that instance turned to me and he goes, are you sure? Like, we don't need to pit stop. But because we've done so much prep, I was like, yeah, we need to do this. So it does come down to more a hierarchy at that point. And we go through that again by analysing it afterwards. So every decision that's a bit controversial, right or wrong, we go through afterwards. And then hopefully people learn. And the idea being, for me, it was very important that the younger members of my team learnt such that you would get the same result. I sort of had this concept of, if I get hit by a bus, the team should operate. Well, let's run over in the pit or whatever.
With so much information and so much data, and we're a software company at heart, maybe you could just share a little bit about the technology that you use and what's important when organisations like Aston Martin are looking to select the technology to help analyse that data.
Yeah, sure. So we rely, as you would expect, very, very heavily on software. Software for a variety of things, different software depending on what it is. So different software for car data, different software for strategy data, whatever the case may be. The first thing in that environment is it needs to be robust. Yep. It's really key. You're on a pit wall, you're isolated from the factory. it's worth pointing out when we talk about data that we have the pit wall of people, but we also have a mission control full of people that are looking at the data in a more isolated environment. They can sometimes make better decisions in the pit wall because they're not hot or cold or wet or, whatever the case may be on the pit wall. So that environment is often maybe better for some decisions. So there's a robustness. If we think of strategy specifically, a lot of it is lap times taken away from another lap time. So the calculation at times is very easy, but it's about having a piece of software that does that calculation quickly and effectively and presents it in a really clear way. So we're looking a lot for the data visualization, how you can see something, not misread it, and make a decision based on that data repeatedly. The other thing that focus a lot in the strategy group is that each member of the group presented with the similar information would make the same decision. So you're trying to have no confusion in what's going on there. We use a lot of our data for analysis on a Friday night or whatever. So it's just about trying to make sure that the data the software brings so much to it that it rules out a lot of the slow lap times, the traffic lap times, whatever the case may be, but you get a repeatable bit of analysis time and time again.
Okay. So automating, not the mundane, but what can be automated. What about the advent, or how would you see the advent of artificial intelligence in maybe making some of those decisions for you to free up your time?
Yeah.
To make the more complex or more challenging dynamic.
So, the golden ticket is if you could have, and we're not there yet, I think, from an F1 side, but if I could have, the computer chess game where I just say, I'm going to stop this lap, and your AI software says, this is how we expect everyone to react. And we do have 10 humans on pit walls or emission controls making decisions. So it's about sort of characterising their decision, how likely they are to start on one tyre or another, how likely they are to stop aggressively, how likely they are to take a safety car, whatever the case may be. We obviously do a lot on a Friday night or Saturday night predicting what we think the strategy may be. So we use a lot of machine learning for that. We, again, think of our matrix of data, all the variables that go in there. We sweep huge amount of simulations for degradation models, for track temperature models, for accidents, for safety cars, loads and loads of things go into that. And you're trying to take, what you feel may be the best strategy given all the situations you're likely to face. So it's from simple things like how likely you are to have a safety car on in Brazil lap 1, whatever the case may be. So you're sweeping a whole range of things. And like last week, for example, people were very reactive to the degradation they've seen in the first bits of the race. So they're using their models or simulations, whatever, to predict the final bit of the race.
There was just some Mercedes guys around. I've got two more questions. And these are probably more about you than the data.
Okay.
So it's a highly charged environment. And you've got to make logical decisions, but things are getting really exciting. How do you keep your emotions away from the decision making? Because as human beings, we make emotional decisions and look for logic.
Yeah.
But how do you?
Practice, for one. You become trapped in this world where you're forced to make decisions. Every lap, the 53 is an extreme, but every lap you have to make a decision. And even by deciding not to pit, that is still a decision. So you're forced into repeated decisions, lap one, lap one, lap. So especially in a race, there's very little time for that negative reflection. It's an interesting dynamic because I've felt as a female, I would hold on to someone shouted about something more negatively than I think my male counterparts did, because that's just who you are. But it is about keep going. And there have been times, I remember one race in Germany, which we made horrendous decisions. We had bad decision after bad decision. And my manager just said, right, everyone stop talking. Just take 2 seconds and then we'll start again. Because everyone was just getting more frantic and frantic on the pit wall. But it's about that sort of reset to go, we can still make good decisions. Yes, the race hasn't gone as we would like, but we need to continue to make decisions going forward. So it's about that reset and saying, let's just go back to basics. Let's go back to looking at our data. Let's go back to start from here, and we'll analyse that stuff later. We'll go through all that later. We know we will. So let's not argue about that now. Let's keep the procedure going forward.
Oh, it's just next week.
Exactly.
Final closing question. So it's race day. Tensions are high. You've been at the track for a couple of days. The race is 2 hours. You're on. Your nerves are shredded. Mine would be anyway. How do you decompress from all of that? You can't just walk away from the pit wall and not feel.
You feel very tired when you walk away from the pit wall. So I always felt very prepared going to the pit wall. I felt the 5 minutes before the race were almost most difficult, because that's the bit that you have no control over. You've made your plan, you've decided your start tire, you're sat on the pit wall waiting to find out others' start tires. And in that bit, you've no control. Into turn 1, in lap 1, you've no control. And that's the bit I always find the most frantic. Equally during a pit stop, when you turn around to watch the pit stop, you have no control of the guys. You've done your best, but you've no control. And then at the end of the race, there tends to be quite a heated, for want of a better word, quite heated debrief on the pit wall, which is never the best place to debrief, where people are like, why did we do that? Or why did we do that? Or this was really good, or whatever. It's like, well, let's do the analysis properly later. Let's not make any rash judgments now. But if people sort of want an answer quickly, and then depending on whether it's gone well, you'll have a hug and a handshake and a glass of champagne, on the rare occasions. Or you sort of get off the pit wall and you walk through the garage and you see all the guys in the garage that have worked to build the car or worked to do the pit stop. And I think the hardest bit of my job was if you felt you'd made some bad decisions, and then you had to walk through that garage and say, there's a lot of people that have gone to build that car and get it on track, and we messed up at the last hurdle. So I always find that more difficult than anything else.
Imagine. I don't know about you. I could hear a pin drop during that conversation. That was amazing. We've all learned so much. I want to, on behalf of everybody here, I just want to say thank you very much for spending your time with us this evening.
No problems. Thank you, Al.
Thank you, brother. That was great. If I say thank you, and then I just